Hey guys, tonight we drift into a world that almost was, but never came to be. You're standing at the edge of Alexandria, a city that hums with lantern light and scroll-laden carts. The sea air is warm, the streets alive with quiet scholars, and somewhere not far off, the Library of Alexandria still stands. Not in ruins, not in ash, but breathing, alive. Columns stretch into the dusk, carved with the names of forgotten thinkers. You step beneath an archway and feel a hush fall over you, as if the building itself expects reverence. Candle flames flicker behind stained glass, dust motes dance like golden fireflies. You take a breath, and the scent of old parchment, olive oil, and salt air fills your lungs. And yes, you're probably not surviving this, because in this alternate thread of time, the world is far too different, far too advanced. But you'll enjoy the ride. Before we slip too far into this dream, take a second to like and subscribe, only if you truly enjoy drifting through time with me. And hey, drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening. I love knowing where and when you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin walking, not rushing, just floating. The library is enormous, not one building, but a complex. Ornate gardens wrap around moonlit courtyards. Trees are labeled with both their Greek names and coded botanical references in ancient Sanskrit. You pass stone fountains that whisper verses from the Rig Veda, translated into Egyptian Coptic, then Greek, and then something else entirely. A new script, one you've never seen. It's not gibberish, it's just ahead of you. Historians still argue whether the library truly held 500,000 scrolls or closer to 1,000,000. But in this version of reality, they never stopped counting. A young woman in a deep saffron robe passes you, clutching a scroll so long it trails like a tail behind her. She nods. You follow. You pass rooms with astronomers charting orbits centuries ahead of Galileo. One holds a globe, brass and sapphire, carved with not only Europe, Asia, and Africa, but 2 other continents, not yet touched by Roman feet. You're not in a museum, you're in a living engine. The library doesn't just store ideas, it generates them. Every hallway hums with debate. A man in indigo argues that dreams are electrical. A child sketches a bird that glides using copper wings. You glance back and realize the stars are wrong. Too many, too close. That's because telescopes aren't a secret anymore. They're here, fashioned from polished crystal tubes and rotating mirrors. A joke from a scribe slips into your ear. Aristotle said the Earth was the center, but he'd never seen Saturn blink. You smile. Or maybe you're dizzy. The library has this effect, like stepping into a mind thinking at full speed. Somewhere, a scribe drops a jar of ink and curses in 4 languages. You're ushered past that commotion into a great domed room where scrolls levitate ever so slightly, suspended by magnets and invention. Here's a secret you overhear. The scribes have found ways to copy scrolls faster than any monk or hand. Using pressurized ink molds and mechanical stamping, they've started replicating ideas faster than anyone expected. A proto-printing press centuries ahead of Gutenberg. No one calls it that. They just call it the spreader. You run your fingers across one scroll and shiver. It's a surgical guide for brain operations, dated 500 years before you were born. Inside, honey-slicked scalpels, gold thread sutures, and recovery diagrams that look oddly modern, the kind of knowledge people burn rather than share. A man leans close to you and whispers, "The mind is just a series of winds. If we learn the winds, we control the storms." He smiles, and you realize the air here smells faintly of ozone, something electrical brewing in ancient copper coils nearby. Historians still argue whether the Library of Alexandria could have sparked an early industrial age. But you're walking proof. This world isn't ancient. It's just left-turn ancient. And in this bend of time, knowledge wasn't hoarded. It flowed. But just as the stars begin to move, a shadow flickers across the page. The shadow moves, and your breath catches. It's not sinister, just unfamiliar. A flutter of movement across the great domed ceiling. You glance up and realize it isn't a person casting that shade. It's a machine. A massive brass arm swings gently above you, suspended by gears so finely crafted they make no sound. At its tip, a rotating lens, adjusting, focusing, writing. The scribes call it oculus. It's an early projector and recorder in one, archiving lectures directly onto wax tablets using etched beams of light. No ink, no parchment wasted. You turn to the nearest wall, and there it is, a moving diagram of the human heart, pulsing in real time, projected with colored shadows and amber overlays. A student sits beneath it, carving matching illustrations into a clay slab. He hums a tune older than Latin. And here's the kicker. No one treats this as miraculous. In this version of history, innovation didn't pause. It stacked. The flame of curiosity never flickered out in some smoky siege. It just kept rising. Scrolls line the marble corridors, some so ancient they predate writing itself. You find one made of pressed palm fibers, detailing astronomy techniques from Nubian sky watchers. Another describes an ancient Chinese water clock calibrated to measure lunar months with eerie precision. One scholar murmurs beside you, "The Persians believed that every star is a gate. We're just now finding the hinges." You try not to grin. It's too much, and yet not enough. You round a corner and walk directly into a chamber labeled Mechanicae. Inside, wonders, pulley-lifted carts, rotating gears the size of dinner plates. A wooden automaton pours water from a ceramic pitcher into a basin, then refills itself from a hidden reservoir beneath the floor. Your jaw slackens. Historians still argue whether Hieron of Alexandria truly built a steam-powered engine. But here you see one puffing quietly in the center of the room, driving a wheel that turns a belt that powers a grindstone. Nothing massive, but steady, reliable, a heartbeat of industry in a marble heart of thought. You chuckle as a young boy tosses a grape onto the engine's casing and shouts, "Cook it faster!" The grape vanishes. No one's sure where it went. The librarian overseeing the room wears teal robes and copper spectacles. He invites you to peer through a glass cylinder, crafted, he says, in Carthage. You lean close. The world refracts. What you see shocks you. It's a mechanical blueprint spinning slowly inside a crystal orb, not drawn, constructed. Three-dimensional diagrams of a bird-like flying machine with notes in 4 languages spiraling outwards like petals on a flower. Arabic, Sanskrit, Greek, and something older, maybe Phoenician. The librarian taps it. This one's from Daedalus, or so the scroll says. He winks. Whether he's joking, you'll never know. You leave the chamber light-headed. The night air hits your face. You're in the gardens again. Somewhere between olive tree shadows and softly burbling fountains, a woman plays a stringed instrument with only one string. Each note causes leaves to tremble. Another librarian sits by a reflecting pool, explaining the principles of resonance to a group of barefoot students. He drops stones at measured intervals. The ripples overlap. Interference, harmony, chaos, all depending on rhythm. The stars above shimmer unnaturally. Then you realize they shimmer differently because people here actually mapped them, with lenses, with ink, with time. You overhear a traveler boasting, "My father sailed to the east using only the stars and a scroll from the library." He points to a dog-eared map of the Indian coast, not drawn from myth, drawn from sight. Quirky fact. One scroll describes sea beasts with heads like painted masks seen off the coast of what would one day be Japan. Probably giant squid, or artistic license. Who knows? You lean over a different map, one much older. The western edge shows land, a jagged coast, annotated, named. But it's not Europe, it's the Americas, and the scroll dates centuries before Columbus. You feel dizzy again. Historians still argue whether ancient sailors reached the New World. Here, there is no argument, just directions. A small girl beside you points to a place labeled Thule. She whispers, "That's where the sun never sets." You glance down. The scroll is warm to the touch. And just when you think your mind can't take more, someone mutters, "We've even found instructions for a lens that can see the soul." You scoff. But then again, this is Alexandria. And just as your finger brushes that strange soul lens scroll, the air shifts, a light breeze, and a door opens silently behind you. The door creaks softly as it opens, and a wash of warm amber light spills out, like the inside of a beehive, golden and pulsing with quiet life. You step through. This is not a reading room, it's a vault. The walls here are not lined with scrolls, but with glass jars. Hundreds, maybe thousands, each one filled with something you weren't expecting. Words. Not written, spoken. Each jar glows faintly, and you realize the library's most radical invention isn't a new scroll or a flying machine. It's memory. In this reality, they figured out how to capture voices. Not digitally, of course, no silicone or wires here. Just clever acoustics, winding spirals of resin, and echo chambers crafted from hollowed olive seeds. You lift one jar marked Cleopatra, Debate on the Nile. A faint humming stirs inside. You uncork it. A woman's voice, confident, sharp, musical, flows into the room. She's arguing, playfully, with a philosopher about whether crocodiles can dream. The laughter that follows sounds like bronze wind chimes. You drop the jar, but it doesn't break. These people had foresight. A sign overhead reads, Phonothèque, the voice archives. And that's when it hits you. In this world, history isn't just written, it's heard. A boy nearby listens to a jar labeled Homer reciting the Odyssey. You catch a single line in ancient Greek before it seals again. Sing to me of the man, muse. His eyes glisten. Imagine it. Epics passed down not through faulty translations, but through the actual voice of a bard long gone, each inflection preserved, each pause, every mispronounced name and subtle joke. There's one marked Socrates' last words. You don't dare open it. You wander deeper into the vault. The floor tilts slightly downward, the air growing cooler. The jars here are older, dustier. One shelf is labeled Languages That No Longer Exist. You crack one open, just a sliver, and the room fills with a liquid, vowel-rich hum. It sounds like birds arguing underwater, beautiful and sad, a language no one alive today can name. And yet here it is, alive. A scholar walks by, cradling a jar like it's a newborn. She nods at you and says, This one remembers the first thunder god, not Thor, older. You want to laugh, but she isn't joking. Quirky tidbit. The library apparently has a whole section of jars for mystical utterances. Phrases from oracles, desert visionaries, and sleep talkers. One jar, someone claims, contains a prophecy spoken by a man who dreamed for 30 years straight. You don't ask to hear it. Historians still argue whether oracles were politically manipulated or truly visionary. But here you hear them, literally. And whether they're truth or theater, well, that's up to your ears now. You find a bench, worn smooth by centuries of other curious listeners, and sit beside an old woman murmuring to a jar in Coptic. You don't understand the words, but the cadence is soft and lullaby-like. She strokes the glass as if soothing it. For a moment, you feel like this isn't just knowledge preservation. It's a form of care, reverence, even grief, because not everything here survived in scrolls. Some memories were too raw, too sacred, too strange. You pass a sealed alcove labeled the unopened section. The sign reads simply, Too much, too soon. You shiver. As you turn to leave the vault, you catch a glimpse of your reflection in one of the jars. The flicker of candlelight plays across your face, making you look older than you are, or maybe wiser. Back in the hallway, the world seems louder, as if sound carries differently after that kind of silence. You hear a girl laughing, the rustle of sandals, the soft sizzle of fish being cooked over a brazier somewhere far below. And then a bell tolls, 3 soft chimes. You don't know what it means, but people begin moving. Students gather scrolls, tuck jars into cloth satchels, and make their way toward a massive central stairwell that descends into the ground like a spiral carved by gods. You follow. The stairs are smooth from centuries of use. A mosaic on the wall tells a story of a man walking into the underworld with a torch made of scrolls. Nice. The further you go down, the cooler it gets. You spot a mural, a woman with stars in her hair and numbers in her palms. Beside her, a lion carries a scroll in its jaws. Below that, another sign. Archives of Forbidden Thought. You pause. A young librarian at the entrance looks up. He says, "We're only open till moonrise. Plenty of time." He hands you a lantern and, with a dry chuckle, adds, "Try not to unlearn too much." You smile and step into the dark. The lantern casts a pale gold halo around your feet as you descend into the archive of forbidden thought. The air shifts, heavier, stiller. It smells like iron, old paper, and something floral you can't place, maybe crushed petals from an ancient offering. Here, the library breathes slower. You're no longer in a place meant to display knowledge, but to conceal it. The shelves twist like vines, not orderly but organic, grown into alcoves and root-like chambers. As you pass through, the titles begin to blur the line between history and heresy. A scroll reads, "How to Rewrite Time Without Dying." Another, "The Emotions of Stars, a Taxonomy." And then there's this one, resting on a pillow of red silk, "The True Number of the Human Soul." Your hand hovers above it. You don't open it yet. This is where scholars come to challenge the foundations, to ask not what happened, but what should have and what could never be. In this reality, where the Library of Alexandria never burned, there was no censorship of thought, no theological wars over heliocentric models, no suppressing of atoms or algebra, or the idea that perhaps time flows in spirals, not lines. Mainstream historical fact. In our timeline, thinkers like Hypatia and Aristarchus dared to imagine a sun-centered cosmos centuries before Copernicus, but their voices were drowned, often violently. Here, they were amplified. You pass a chamber with a glass dome ceiling. Dozens of thinkers sit cross-legged in the starlight, sketching what they call night mathematics, patterns in starlight they believe form the grammar of the universe. One whispers, "The stars blink in Fibonacci." You blink back. Fringe tidbit. A scroll titled "Recipe for Talking to the Moon" claims that silver bells, honey, and owl bones can open a channel to lunar intelligences. Most scholars dismiss it, but you notice it's been checked out 327 times. You move on. A corridor labeled dangerous truths, hums with heat, even though no torches burn. On its walls, equations that look alive, lines that pulse like heartbeats. You don't understand them, but something in your gut clenches, as if the truth is bigger than you're meant to carry. A note beside one diagram reads, "Truth without wisdom is a knife in the dark." You turn a corner and freeze. A mirror stands at the end of the hall, but your reflection is wrong. You're older, wiser, wearing a robe with embroidered constellations. You blink, and your reflection does not. Then it smiles. Historians still argue whether the library housed magical texts or if those were later fictions layered on its legend. Here, in this reality, they don't argue, they study. You're led into a chamber called the Ephorium, a hall dedicated entirely to what-ifs. Each scroll here begins with an alternate scenario. What if the flood had never come? What if Rome had allied with Carthage? What if Atlantis had truly risen? And yours, what if the library had burned? A librarian catches you reading that last one and laughs gently. Fiction is such a fun mirror, isn't it? You ask, what's the purpose of this section? She replies, to remember that history is fragile, but imagination, that's what makes it breathe. You pause before a bronze door etched with words that seem to shimmer in and out of language. She says, that leads to the theater of alternate futures. You raise an eyebrow. A theater? She grins. You'll see. The room inside is circular, tiered like an ancient amphitheater. At its center, a pool of black water. As you sit, the lights dim, though no torches go out. Then the water shifts. Ripples form, and without sound or warning, you're no longer looking at water. You're watching worlds. One by one, the surface displays shimmering visions of what might have been. A world where steam power bloomed during the Bronze Age. A planet crisscrossed by skyships made of copper and cloth. Cities on Mars carved by ancient earthlings. A version of you, standing in a library shaped like a seashell, wearing robes of rust and smoke. The visions fade, the water stills. A soft voice speaks from somewhere above you. Not prophecy, not memory, just invitations. You sit quietly for a long time, longer than you think, and then the pool flashes once more. A single image, the library in flames. You inhale sharply. Why show that? You whisper. A voice replies almost kindly. Because that's the world you came from, remember? You step back, heart hammering. This world, the one you've wandered, is beautiful, vast, impossible, and temporary. Like a dream you weren't supposed to remember. As you leave the Ephorium, you glance over your shoulder. The bronze door closes behind you. The sound is soft, but final. The air shifts again as you leave the Ephorium. cooler now, touched by salt. You realize you're nearing the section of the library that borders the sea. Yes, borders. This place isn't in Alexandria anymore. It contains Alexandria, and parts of it spill into the Mediterranean. You step through an archway that smells faintly of brine and driftwood. The marble beneath your feet is damp, pocked by barnacles. You hear waves echoing through high stone corridors. Somewhere far off, gulls cry like distant echoes of forgotten empires. Welcome to the nautical wing. It isn't merely for books on the sea. It is the sea. You walk along shelves shaped like waves, holding scrolls bound in kelp thread, coral inlays sparkling between the spines. Each one tells of ships lost not just to storms, but to dimensions. Explorers who never returned, unless you count the whispers they left in these pages. A glass tunnel stretches ahead, submerged entirely beneath the sea. You pass through watching shadows drift above you, massive, slow-moving. Maybe whales, maybe not. On the far end, a room glowing blue. Inside, scholars sit cross-legged in salt water, scrolls floating before them in waterproof sheaths. They hum in harmony, a kind of sonic cataloging system. The water ripples with each note, shifting the scrolls gently like lily pads. Mainstream historical fact. The Library of Alexandria was known to hold extensive maritime records, maps, tide tables, even speculative routes beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Most were lost in our timeline. Here, they were expanded. A child, yes, a literal child, no older than 10, guides you to a shelf marked Temporal Currents. You ask her, "Is this about tides?" She smiles. Time tides. She pulls a scroll and reads from it in a sing-song voice. When stars align with ocean veins, the past leaks forward and the future washes back. You ask her what it means. She shrugs, but her eyes glitter knowingly. It means be careful where you sail. Fringe tidbit. One scholar believes certain whirlpools off the Egyptian coast are not natural, but the remnants of ancient portals, created by machines whose blueprints were lost in a scroll titled "The Anchor That Floated." You keep moving. In a cove-shaped chamber, you find a large bronze compass suspended in mid-air, spinning slowly. Around it, floating islands of text orbit like tiny moons, each one a logbook from an impossible voyage. One reads, "Journey to the nightless north, where time forgot to pass." Another, "The man who sailed to the moon without leaving the sea." A voice behind you murmurs, "These captains return different." You turn, an old librarian with kelp in his beard. His robe glows faintly, like fish scales. He says, "You want to know the greatest secret?" You nod. He gestures toward a black conch shell resting on a pedestal. He says, "Listen." You kneel, press it to your ear, and you hear wind. But then voices, your voice, saying things you haven't said yet. You drop the shell. The old man nods. Some truths arrive early. Historians still argue whether ancient mariners truly believed in time distortions at sea. In our world, it's brushed off as legend. Here, it's a chapter in the beginner's syllabus. As you move to leave, a wave crashes above the glass ceiling, sending fractured light dancing across the walls. You pause, watch it shimmer like living ink. A scroll beside the door catches your eye. The future that floated in. You don't open it. You already know what it says. As you exit the nautical wing, you're soaked, not physically, but somewhere deeper, the kind of wet that dreams leave behind. The hallway tilts upward now. You're climbing again. A stairwell carved into fossil stone, each step etched with a single word. You read them as you go. If only the world could remember what it once dreamed. You reach a door, push, it creaks, and beyond it lies the future? Or maybe not. Maybe it's something stranger. You step through the creaking door and find yourself outside. Except it's not Alexandria, not the one built of marble and history. This place is different, more alive than stone, more imagined than mapped. You've entered the chamber of futures. The sky above you ripples like the surface of a pond, not clouds, possibilities. Entire alternate timelines float overhead, shimmering like oil on water. You look up, and one drifts low enough for you to glimpse it. In that sky, airships made of polished cedar drift above a verdant Egypt. Beneath them, children ride sphinxes instead of camels. Temples glow with electricity. Not the modern kind, but something softer, drawn from within quartz obelisks and humming reeds. This is a future with the library. A scholar beside you, her robe stitched with stars, says softly, "Every timeline begins with a book opened or not." You walk beside her down a path lined with tiles made of old ink. Each footstep leaves faint impressions, paragraphs in languages you don't recognize but feel like you've always known. Mainstream historical fact: the loss of the Library of Alexandria may have set scientific progress back by centuries. In this place, they explore what we lost by showing what was possible. You pass under arches where gravity doesn't quite work the same way. People walk sideways, upside down, discussing ethics, time, love, and whether the moon should be taxed. Your guide says, "This is the agora of unwritten tomorrows." In a circle of grass, children debate Plato's ghost. One argues that democracy is flawed. Plato, sitting cross-legged and mostly transparent, nods in agreement, but insists they read scroll 403b before dismissing his ideas. It's chaotic, beautiful, impossible. You touch a floating book. It hums. Inside, a detailed schematic of a neural-linked society powered by empathy. No currency, no laws, just resonance. Fringe tidbit. One scroll claims a society here developed artificial dreams, shared hallucinations, and allowed conflict resolution through symbolic storytelling rather than violence. And the people believed it because it worked. You see people plugging crystal rods into small orbs. Dream translators, your guide says. We use them to build consensus. She hands you one. You hesitate. She smiles. You don't have to agree with the future, but you should listen to it. You close your eyes and plug it in, and suddenly you're flying. Not your body, your mind. You skim over oceans of ink, fields of books that grow like wheat. In the distance, pyramids open like flower petals. The sun sings in a minor key. Everything smells like memory. When you open your eyes again, you're crying, just a little. Your guide says, most people do. It's the hope, gets to you. You move toward a pavilion made of paper leaves. There, philosophers paint with thoughts. Not words, thoughts. They smear ideas onto scrolls, using tiny brushes dipped in memory. You watch one create a painting of a world where the Renaissance began 1,000 years earlier, where alchemy became science without ever losing the magic. Historians still argue whether a longer-lived library would have accelerated or fractured civilization. Some say we weren't ready. Others say we were never given the chance. Here, they don't argue. They explore. You find a doorway humming quietly. Its frame is made of tiny gears, each etched with a name: Hypatia, Eratosthenes, Archimedes, men and women whose work burned in your timeline. But here they became chapters in futures you can now smell in the air. You take one step closer. The ground beneath your feet shifts from marble to soil to something warm and velvet-like. Your guide says the next room shows what you would have been if your world had remembered. You say nothing, but you walk forward, because who wouldn't? And as you pass through the doorway, you feel the change like a sigh through your bones. Your fingertips buzz. The air tastes like electricity and jasmine. And on the far side, a mirror waits. But the person looking back isn't you. Not yet. But maybe. You reach out to touch the mirror. It's warm, alive almost. The surface shimmers, and your reflection shifts. Not just your clothes, though they now resemble a scholar's robe woven from indigo threads and tiny silver glyphs, but something deeper. You look like someone who's always known more than they could explain, like a keeper of truths. You blink. Behind your reflection, shelves, stacks, scrolls stretching out forever in impossible directions. These aren't stored, they're grown like coral reefs of memory. You turn around. You're in the scriptorium of the self. In this chamber, each person writes their own legacy, but in reverse. Every decision you've ever made glows faintly in the walls, some brighter, some dim, but all visible. A librarian with cloud-colored hair floats toward you. No feet, just air. She gestures gently to a scroll hovering nearby. You squint. It's your life. Written in a strange script, but you somehow understand it. The places you chose silence over curiosity. The afternoons you might have explored something deeper, but chose distraction. The roads not taken, glowing softly. She speaks in a whisper that somehow echoes. This is not punishment. It's potential. You nod slowly. Mainstream fact. Ancient scholars at the Library of Alexandria didn't just collect texts. They copied, translated, and commented. The idea wasn't to preserve, it was to evolve. Knowledge wasn't static, it was a living river. In this future, that river flows straight through you. You're offered a pen, not modern, but a reed soaked in something that smells like cinnamon and rain. You hesitate. What happens if I write something, you ask. Then you change, she says simply. You begin. One sentence. Then two. And suddenly, the chamber around you blooms. Each word you write births new branches of knowledge. Fluttering scrolls, animated diagrams, living ideas that sprout wings and vanish into the sky. Fringe tidbit. One scribe here claims he once wrote a recipe so powerful it inspired 1,000 years of cuisine across timelines. He called it butter of the mind. No one really knows what it was in it, but supposedly eating it gave you dreams of civilizations that never fell. You're surrounded by others now, quietly writing, quietly rewriting themselves. Each story feeds the library, and the library feeds back. A staircase unfurls in the distance. You climb. Each step feels heavier, not burdensome, just weighty, like carrying history on your back. And maybe you are. At the top, a balcony. The view? Impossible. The city spreads below, but now it's clearer than ever. It's not just one version of Alexandria, it's every version. Alexandria as a steampunk haven of copper domes and pneumatic scroll elevators. Alexandria as a floating city of light and mirrors, where knowledge refracts like sun through stained glass. Alexandria as a living organism, with libraries that breathe and archivists that bloom each morning with new ideas instead of leaves. And somewhere near the center, the version you came from, dusty, broken, missing its heart. Historians still argue whether any of this could have happened, whether the library's full survival might have sparked utopia or simply shifted human folly into a new flavor. But here, up here, you can feel the truth. It's not about perfection, it's about possibility. Someone next to you, dressed like a Babylonian librarian with an LED monocle, offers you a bowl of something steaming. Soup of what-ifs, she says with a wink. You sip. It tastes like honey and lemon and the sharp edge of ideas too big to name. As you drink, the wind changes. It smells like charcoal, burned papyrus. You turn to the horizon. Smoke. You're being pulled back, not physically, something deeper. The memory of the fire still exists, and it's growing louder. The guide from earlier reappears, placing a hand on your shoulder. This part is difficult, she says, but necessary. You nod, and together you begin descending the stairs again toward whatever flame waits below. And as the light dims, the echoes of 1,000 Alexandrias whisper behind you. Remember us. The scent of burning scrolls is unmistakable now. Bitter, dry, almost metallic. Each step you take back toward the heart of the library feels like you're walking deeper into memory, into grief that somehow isn't just yours. It belongs to everyone who ever longed to know more than they were told. You emerge into a hallway you don't recognize. It's narrower, older. The stones here are darker, the light flickering like candle flames caught in a wind that hasn't quite arrived. On the walls are faint etchings, names of scholars you've never heard of, and beside each name, a glowing red line. You touch one. Suddenly, you know them. This one was a child prodigy from Bactria who discovered a method for mapping memory. That one, a woman from Carthage who pioneered a way to read star positions as harmonic music. None of them survived the fire. None of their work made it to your time. The red lines, they're severed threads. Historians still argue whether the fire that consumed the Library of Alexandria was a single catastrophic event or a series of slow political erosions. Some say Julius Caesar's siege was to blame. Others point fingers at early Christians, later Muslim rulers, even jealous scholars who feared what they couldn't understand. But here in this corridor, the result feels the same. Silence. You hear voices up ahead, urgent, panicked. You run toward them. A group of scholars, robed in every color imaginable, are frantically pulling scrolls from shelves, piling them into wheeled carts made of brass and bark. Others chant incantations over floating books, trying to send them elsewhere, through time, through dimensions, anywhere but here. "Help us," someone cries. You do. You grab a set of thin tablets inscribed with geometric flame patterns and rush to a glowing circle marked Preserve. As you drop them in, they vanish, just blink out of existence. "Where do they go?" you ask. "Forward," says a monk with luminous hands. Fringe tidbit. Some legends claim that a few Alexandria texts did survive, encoded in obscure alchemical manuscripts, hidden in underground monasteries, or even transferred psychically to initiates. One tale says that Da Vinci's mind was touched by one such echo, that his notebooks were just interpretations of dreams sent from the lost library. You keep working. Scroll after scroll, tablet after codex. Sometimes you don't even know what language they're written in, but something in you insists this one matters. Amid the chaos, a strange calm forms. You realize these people aren't just fleeing a fire. They're making a sacrifice. They're staying behind to protect a few last artifacts, to guard a portal Yes, there's a portal now, swirling like oil and fire, while others escape. A woman with soot-streaked cheeks grabs your hand. "You've seen the future," she says. "You are the future." "I'm just visiting," you protest weakly. She smiles. "Aren't we all?" She places a tiny prism in your palm. "Take it," she whispers. "It remembers light." You tuck it away. Mainstream fact. Some documents from Alexandria did survive, translated into Arabic centuries later, forming the foundation of Islamic Golden Age science. Through scholars like Al-Kindi, Avicenna, and Alhazen, echoes of the library's genius shaped optics, medicine, and mathematics for generations. But you understand now, the fire wasn't just about loss. It was about what didn't get to happen. The knowledge that might have connected minds across continents long before ships did. The inventions that might have cured or destroyed or reshaped civilization as you know it. The peace treaties that might have been written in the margins of a poem, centuries ahead of their time. You're pulled once again, this time more forcefully. The portal flashes. You turn back. The library glows gold one last time, then darkens. But even as it fades, you can hear something, faint, barely audible. It's a whisper, a name. Not yours, not theirs, just the idea of knowing. And just as your feet touch solid ground again, back in your time, your room, your world, the prism in your hand flickers. Inside it, for just a moment, is the reflection of a scroll. Unreadable, unreachable, but undeniably real. And as the last embers fade in your mind, you feel the quiet weight of what could have been. The air around you now is still, too still. You look down at the prism in your hand. It hums softly, not a sound exactly, more like the faint suggestion of a sound, like the memory of music echoing through a place you've never actually been. Your room has returned, blankets, soft lamplight, the hum of the fan like an ancient wind winding its way through lost corridors. But you can still feel the warmth of the library on your skin, the ache of its loss somewhere deep in your ribs. And just like that, the world shifts again. You find yourself standing in a city that never should have existed. Marble streets curve gently beneath your feet, engraved with equations instead of cobblestones. Above, floating discs of copper and glass hover silently, displaying poems about gravity and love and the rhythm of the stars. Children in indigo robes chase light around the corners of crystalline towers, laughing in tongues long forgotten. A world where the library never burned. Here, time moved differently. Knowledge wasn't hoarded or censored. It was cultivated like a garden. Anyone could walk into a school and learn how to calculate the orbit of Jupiter, or recite the molecular structure of honey, or decode the music hidden in bird calls. Historians still argue whether the burning of the library truly set humanity back 1,000 years. But here, in this version of history, there is no argument. There is only what grew in its place. You wander through a marketplace of ideas, literally. Merchants sell books bound in silk that change with each reading. An old man in russet robes offers you a drink he says will help you dream in Latin. You politely decline. Then something strange. A child tugs your sleeve, offers you a mirror. You peer into it. You see Earth, your Earth. Towering cities, yes, but also endless wars, lost chances, wisdom rediscovered too late. You see how many times humanity had to relearn the same lessons. The mirror clouds, then clears. You see your own face, and behind you, the library, still burning. Mainstream historical fact. The Great Library was said to have housed over 400,000 scrolls at its peak. Some estimate it included the complete works of Homer, lost plays of Sophocles, even the records of Egypt's pharaohs from thousands of years earlier. It wasn't just a library, it was a repository of all known human knowledge. The prism in your hand pulses. The child smiles and says, "You can't save it, but you can remember it." That's when the city begins to fade, not from fire this time, but like a dream at sunrise. Your feet touch grass. You're in a meadow now. Stars stretch overhead in spirals. A soft river runs beside you, murmuring in languages too old for dictionaries. A quirky tidbit? Some medieval monks believed that if a word was never spoken aloud for 100 years, it vanished forever, not just from memory, but from reality itself. That silence was not just absence, but erasure. You whisper, "Alexandria." The grass shivers. You whisper again, "Knowledge is never truly lost." A flicker in the sky, a constellation shifts. A figure appears among the stars. A woman, arm outstretched, scrolls in both hands. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. You understand. This wasn't about saving the library. It was about remembering it so vividly, so richly, so fiercely that something of it survives inside you. Inside anyone who dares to imagine a world where wisdom isn't burned. The wind returns. It carries one final whisper. Not in Latin, not in Greek, but in something older, the quiet sound of thought itself. You let it carry you home, back into the dark, back into sleep. You're floating now, not flying, not falling, just gently drifting between breath and memory. The prism is gone. The stars have dimmed. The voices of scholars, poets, dreamers faded to a distant hush like the rustle of parchment under candlelight. And yet, something lingers. The warmth of ancient stone beneath your feet, the scent of ink and myrrh, the hum of knowledge that once moved through halls brighter than any palace. You carry it now, tucked somewhere behind your ribs, nestled close to the heartbeat of wonder. Maybe the Library of Alexandria was doomed to burn. Maybe the scrolls were scattered, the names forgotten, the stories erased by time and empire and fire. But in your dream tonight, it lived again. And perhaps that's all stories ever ask of us, to peep dreaming them, to hold their fragile truths in the quiet corners of our minds, to remember the wisdom buried beneath the ash, and build something new atop the ruins. Let that be enough for now. Feel your breath deepen. Let your body soften. The world outside can wait a little longer. You're safe here, drifting on the currents of what might have been. The stars above blink slowly, patiently. The night wraps itself around you like a warm, worn blanket, quiet, weightless, and steady. Nothing to fix, nothing to chase, only the echo of thought, carried like candlelight through the chambers of sleep. Sweet dream.